Welcome back to Next Wave Conversations, brought to you by the Innovate GPT Group, where we are the cutting edge of generative AI. I'm your host, Chris Lukianenko, and today we're venturing into the transformative world of AI in workforce development with Tim Hutchinson, the visionary co-founder and co-CEO of Skills GPT. Tim's journey from environmental management to revolutionising talent solutions with AI is nothing short of inspiring. I seem to be saying that a lot at the moment. At Skills GPT, he's redefining employee engagement and skill enhancement through bespoke, secure, enterprise-grade AI solutions in partnership with Microsoft. From insights on bridging skills gaps to integrating Azure OpenAI in the workplace, Tim is here to share some invaluable perspectives on the future of workforce development. So I reckon we should get into it. Another great ChatGPT intro. How's that? Was it close?
What an intro.
Hey? That's what we're all
Absolutely
about.
fantastic.
I get to do those
I'm
sorts
a little humbled, Chris.
My whole thing is let AI do the stuff that, takes the time and give me back
Can I
my
have a
time.
copy of that afterwards? That's very good. Yeah.
I feel like we could introduce you to that when you win your first ever, HR award or something
There you
like
go,
that. Is that
there you go.
right? So now everybody, this is great because Tim is actually a fellow podcaster. So he understands the immense pressure I've been under this week as I've completed 8 podcast episodes with all of this sort of film gear. So you're my last one for the week. So I'm keen to get into this one. And then
I empathise. Having said that, I'd actually rather be in your seat than mine as the guest.
Are you
I'd rather be
feeling
the host than the guest, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever actually been a guest on a podcast yet. Maybe one day someone might want to talk to. I'm not sure they want to talk to me about.
Yeah. We'll put you in the hot seat. Yeah.
I don't mind talking about myself every now and then, so I reckon I'll be okay. So now, mate, outside of being an experienced podcaster, you are also an experienced practitioner in the world of workforce development. Can you tell us a bit about what that actually means? Because it sounds like one of those buzz terms to me.
That probably is a buzz term in many ways, and in some ways it encapsulates what we do, but it's probably a little bit limited. So if I may, can I give you a bit of a backstory?
You can do whatever you like. This is your episode.
Of where we've come from.
Yeah.
When I say we, that's myself and my co-founder, Hamish Sinclair.
Yep.
So we were for a number of years in the world of recruitment, and we ran a successful aspect of a successful tech recruitment company. In the latter years of that recruitment business, or my time there, our clients started to talk about skills rather than job titles.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking probably particularly 4 or 5 years back. We started to think about why is a large client base talking about skills and not saying, can you just find us a head of data? And the reality was there was a lack of talent in the market.
Okay.
So clients were starting to think about people beyond a job title and as a bundle of skills. And that took us, it's a long answer to this, Chris, but I need to give you some context.
I can absolutely relate.
This took us into the world of SaaS skills management platforms. And for 3 or 4 years, we were helping organizations start to understand their people, their employees as a bundle of skills, and start to think about their job roles and opportunity as a bundle of skills. And start to bring a bit more colour to the party, if you like, and think about, maybe little Bobby over here doesn't only have to follow this linear path in marketing. Maybe Bobby's skills are applicable elsewhere.
Yeah, okay.
So fast forward, or let's what was that experience for 3 or 4 years in the SaaS world? I now describe it as our heroic failure. Period. Being very transparent. I'm going to start positive. I'm going to start with the heroic part. We learned a huge amount about the whole space of skills management for organizations and for individuals. And we did a lot of work, both with organizations and actually as advisors to government departments. The failure part, I'm going to pass the buck on this, essentially to partly the sort of the technology of the time, partly human behavior, which is that whole space of trying to understand people's skills, understand jobs by skills. It required the individual to have a high level of self-awareness, to be able to articulate what their capabilities were, for organizations to invest vast amounts of time talking to staff, one-on-one interviews, surveys, Excel spreadsheets. Very, very difficult world. Lots of good intentions, a lot of inertia about getting to the end goal, if you like. And at the same time, which I think will be a theme today, the world, it's a cliche, but we all know the world is moving so fast And that process, that traditional process of skills profiling, etc., never keeping up with the pace of change.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
If you want an example, you would think about upskilling and training somebody.
Yep.
And they might be going to an external course for a number of months. But in the meantime, what they're learning is shifting faster than they're learning it, particularly in the tech world.
Yep.
So that is quite a long answer, but, heroic failure, we were, frankly, the widespread arrival of generative AI is I can't express what an unbelievable unlock. It's the key to unlocking that challenge for organizations.
I am a believer of hiring for skills, because like for me, I'm a mixed bag of skills personally. So you're preaching to the converted here, but when you're sort of talking about some of the people that you were dealing with that and trying to make that change, and you said government departments, that wouldn't have been my first pick as somebody who was wanting to lead the charge in that space. But maybe they've got the money to pay to look into it. But last time I checked, government departments still put out position descriptions with 10 things you need to answer.
The diplomat in me is going to come to the fore here. However, specifically, we were often working with government departments whose entire reason for existing was to think about future skilling.
Right.
So in fact,
okay,
they were the ones driving that charge and the innovators in that space, coupled with the resources to invest the time to pilot things, to research these areas, and to try and, with any of these things, the starting point is to try and actually quantify the problem. What problem are we trying to solve? Which again, to jump around slightly, that's where, with generative AI, I'm talking about it being an incredible unlock. It's only a tool in one sense. Still have to understand what problem we're trying to solve. The difference now is that, and there's an irony to this, we're trying to solve problems in the world of skilling and upskilling to keep pace with the rate of change of the world of work. And that wasn't possible until that pace of change brought along generative AI. So there's an irony there. We now have the tools to solve the problem that is being caused by that pace of change in technology.
And what sort of elements of the generative AI are you bringing to the party and all this sort of thing? Without giving away your trade secrets.
No, I have to be slightly careful here, because some of the things we're prototyping are subject to NDAs, and they're pretty cutting edge stuff. But
that's why I've got you on here, because I know you're cutting edge.
Absolutely. We'll get it in the edit, don't worry. So this comes back to human behaviour again. I explained sort of the heroic failure part. Was that human behaviour interaction with tech. So historically, if you were, for example, skills profiling, an individual was often left staring at a list of skills from a skills taxonomy and having to self-select which ones may or may not have been appropriate. Now, you've got a whole heap of challenges here. One is that they need to recognise that they have that skill. In simple terms, the skill may be worded differently than how they recognise it.
Yes.
And this is a perfect example of where generative AI comes in. The listeners and viewers will understand that we talk about natural language, but this is the big unlock, that somebody just in their own words, their own experience, can share who they are, what they enjoy, what they've been doing in the world of work. And from that, they don't need any level of sort of self-awareness necessarily. They're just sharing their stories.
It's a conversation.
It's storytelling. As old as time, isn't it? Storytelling.
Absolutely, yeah.
And from that, we can now infer the information around skills, motivations, attributes. And so it's the same reason why, if you think about it, despite lots of whizzy communications technology, we all quite like the text message. It's kind of very simple, very intuitive. We don't overthink it.
Now we don't even have to type it.
We don't even have to type it.
Yeah.
And that's another good point, because in a lot of the stuff we're prototyping, the interface is not a chat bot. Talking to your mobile, it's listening in with privacy concerns, taking into account on a conversation, whatever it might be.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone this week about one of these kinds of ideas where there was a person in a business who had a lot of experience and wanted to retire. And the people in the business were like, we can't let you retire because you've got way too much stuff in your head. Well, what do we do with it? Oh, well, let's create a Word document. No, because no one's ever going to read that Word document.
Correct.
What if we had a conversation with him and he told us some stories about, how he operates now, what he did in the past, what he thinks he should do if he was an apprentice in that job. Now, let's just have a conversation with him for an hour, 2 hours, whatever the case may be. We transcribe that and then put it through the bots and whatever.
Yep.
And out of that, we gain the insights from this person's 30 or 40 years of knowledge. To me, that is just...
And then you'll know as well as I do that what's also changed is once you've got that sort of repository of information, you don't... A subsequent sort of person interacting with it doesn't need to know what they're searching for.
Yeah.
They can just chat to that repository of information, ask some questions in their own language, say, hey, do you have any view on this? That's the thing. So, I mean, I don't know how many, I'm getting on a bit now, so I remember the concept of the Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
I'm old enough to know Hitchhiker's Guide, but I never read it, so I'll let you run with this.
I'm quoting somebody else who we work with who talks about the idea of generative AI as the Babel fish. Well, the Babel fish was a mythical fish species that somebody could put in their ear and it would translate language.
Okay.
So I quite like the idea because if you think about generative AI as a universal translator, and I'm not talking about just from French to German language in that sense, I'm talking about how individuals describe their job differently to someone else doing exactly the same job. Organizations call jobs something completely different.
Yep.
Some people might say a cleaner, others say whatever it is, a hygiene operative. There are these different nuances.
Yep.
And generative AI is this brilliant, intuitive, natural translator between all of this huge world of structured and unstructured information out there.
I'll tell you,
it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I like it. So what about the customer conversations you're having right now? Not only are
lots of them.
Yeah, but not only are you trying to say to them, hey, let's flip your view of human resources. I know that's not what the word we use nowadays, but let's flip that 90 degrees to talk about skills.
I'd push back on us being in the world of human resources, but that's a whole... we won't go down that path.
Hiring in new employees, workforce development, that's the term.
Yep.
So let's flip your view 90 degrees to say, stop thinking about job titles, start thinking about skills and the gaps that you may have. And also, by the way, here's a bit of this cool tech over here that we're going to throw at you as well. Like, are they scared? Are they excited? What's the feel?
All of the above.
Okay. Yep.
Full range.
Yep.
It's a good question because if you... So park for a second what we're doing.
Yep.
Let's think about what our customer conversation is. First of all, it's not a technical conversation.
Yep.
Talking about the tech is a huge mistake.
Yep.
And I don't just mean from a selfish business development sales perspective. I mean from everybody's sake. With generative AI, it's still only a tool. It's a phenomenal tool, but it's a tool.
Yep.
So let's say it's a spade. The conversation with the client, if you're doing landscape gardening, it shouldn't be about the spade. It should be about, what do you want your garden to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where is it today? What's causing you problems at scale? Where do you want it to be tomorrow? So the conversation is very much it's a business-led conversation to look for, quote, big, hairy problems and big, hairy opportunities in the organization.
Yeah, I like that.
I think I said problems and opportunities being positive.
Yeah.
It's a people-led conversation in the sense that ultimately everything is driven by people. Organizations are the products of their people, not their technology. And we work back from there. So try and give you some examples, some real-world examples. You might be talking to a CEO of it's not hypothetical. We talk to CEOs of energy businesses.
Yep.
Now, in many cases, unsurprisingly, they are trying to work out how you're transitioning the business from legacy world of fossil fuels, etc., increasingly into the green economy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of that's at a macro level is pretty easy to understand. We understand we're moving to renewables, away from fossil fuels. But when you start to get granular on that and start to think, okay, so what are the skill sets we need in the future? Who are our people currently? Do we do, no offense to energy CEOs, but do we do what some have done in the past, which is we're closing down X facility. We need to look after those people. Let's look after them by sending them to outplacement agencies to find jobs elsewhere. because we don't have a job with that title in the new world?
Yep.
Or do we actually spend time understanding who these people are and think about how their skill set transitions into jobs that in some instances didn't even exist a decade ago? Yep. So that's again a fairly long answer, but it's the key there is it's a business-led conversation.
Yep.
About real-world challenges and opportunities. It's people-led.
Yep.
But you talked about what sort of response are we getting. There are clients at every stage. There are real innovators who understand that if you stand still in this space, you're going backwards.
Yep.
I am bound to say that, but I also believe it. You cannot stand still now.
No, I agree.
This is a massive disruption.
Mm.
And understanding it, yes, carefully, yes, in a considered manner, but now is critical.
Yep.
So there are real innovators out there. Interestingly, it's often not the leadership of organizations. It's often, the workers, for want of a better word, and their understanding has come from using GPT. And they've started to make those connections and that leap of understanding to think, hang on a second, this is not just about drafting an email for me.
Yep.
This is something that is fundamentally changing how we communicate, how we manage information. They're the ones who are making the real leap.
Yeah.
So I've been hugely impressed by a lot of people you talk to. That sounds a bit condescending, but it's exciting to see people making that leap and thinking this can fundamentally change our business or, frankly, fundamentally destroy our business.
Yeah.
It's an existential crisis in some cases, or an existential threat. The frustration, if you like, is not the ones who don't understand it at all, because that's completely reasonable.
Yep.
And that's a journey. The frustrating bunch are probably the ones who think they understand where this is going. And what they're doing is, very specifically, they're looking at their current business processes and they're reinventing each. They're applying Gen AI to each step of the existing process. Now, that has some validity in the sense that it might get some productivity gains for those steps.
Yeah.
What it's missing is that those steps in the process probably don't exist in the future. All that really exists are the two ends of that process, which is where are we starting with whatever the situation is? Where do we need to get to?
Yep.
Generative AI can fundamentally reinvent what that looks like.
Yep.
That's the key. And those who haven't made that leap, in many cases, I think they're right. And I try not to think I'm right about anything because it's a real barrier to making progress, and somebody else may know better. So that's a very definite piece we're seeing.
I imagine there is an element of fear that you're dealing with in this space, because we all say, the bots are going to take our jobs, blah blah blah. I like to think of it, and this is something I've stolen from a friend of mine. He said, don't think of you having Chris as the boss with 10 employees. Now you've got Chris as the boss with however many employees, but also you've got 10 virtual employees that are all doing the crappy stuff to allow those humans to do the human stuff. And I'm just wondering, like, are you having those types of discussions where you have to convince, whether they're CEOs and whatever, that there's a meet in the middle here, that we're not about trying to replace people's jobs with bots and whatever. We're trying to enhance and augment their natural abilities as a human so they can concentrate on what they're best at.
Yeah, I think. I mean, yes and no is the unhelpful answer to that. I think. My I'll try to explain.
Thanks.
My sense is that such a get out to say yes and no. Isn't it?
I know. Such a great question. I'll sit on the fence.
I think as with any sudden new technology, there's a spike of media. Exposure. I think it's always the same journey, isn't it? I think the end of last year. It's a bit like Y2K for those old enough.
Yes,
the Great Resignation. There are all these very hyped, fundamental existential changes, and suddenly Gen AI end of last year, everybody's going to lose their job. Nobody was going to have a job at one point. I mean, I don't know who was doing anything, but nobody had a job.
Yep.
Now that's kind of past, which is good. So the conversation is becoming a more pragmatic one, a more operational one. We don't have a lot of conversations about people. Am I going to lose my job? I think very quickly people are starting to think, to your point, okay, I've now got essentially a co-pilot, an ally, a lackey, whatever you want to call it. I could free myself up to do the stuff I really enjoy doing, the more interesting stuff. I've got to be careful about an example, but I'll try and we might have to get some of this in the edit. But I was talking to an organisation.
Can you stop talking about doing the edit? Because people don't realize this is just a free-flowing conversation. You're,
of course.
taking them behind the curtain.
Of course. Well, you can get that edit in the edit, can't you? I was very early on, I was talking to a large fashion group. And one of their leaders had brought in the designers to talk about generative AI, and essentially did a real-time demo, ingested some of their design cues as an organization, prompted I think it was, it was visual generative AI.
Yep, DALL-E or something.
To produce, I'll say it was a bag.
Yep.
Okay. And in real time, it rendered a bag that was essentially as good, if not better, than what the team had been working on for the last 2 years.
Yep.
And he deliberately left at that point for a while the room to sit there looking somewhat depressed. And he then had the sort of, you would have had uplifting music if it was a reality TV show. He then had the uplifting music piece, which is to say, so a lot of your traditional work probably doesn't exist anymore. But hey, do you remember when I mentioned about the new materials new sustainable materials we want to do some R&D around and really understand where they fit into the world? We've never got around to doing it, have we?
Oh.
We're all excited, but we've never got there. It's always down the list of priorities because we're trying to get the design out. He said, we now got time for that sort of work.
I love
the real value add work.
Silver lining stories is just so great. There is a job for those of us that are working within this space to help shift people's mindsets, I think.
Absolutely.
They need to stop thinking that I need to be busy all the time doing all those menial type tasks. I think it's a big thing we've got to do.
Sorry to interrupt, but it does raise a very specific point. So again, real world examples are good. I was at a conference, I think, early this week. I've lost track of time. The world's moving fast. But yeah, I was at a conference earlier this week, and there was some creatives there from a creative design agency. And I think one of them literally said, I'm here to find out whether I'm going to have a job in the future. And that was the boss.
Oh, wow.
It did raise an interesting point that, particularly in creative world, for example, a lot of that work will disappear. You probably don't need somebody to sit and laboriously create a graphic design that can be rendered photorealistically or whatever they're trying to produce in seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to ask yourself, move away from the idea that then they have no job. You then have to, people have to look to themselves and think, well, how are we going to differentiate ourselves as a design agency or a creative agency? What can we still bring to the party? What is our secret sauce? And what do we love doing? And people talk about creating a moat around your business. A lot of businesses face something of a threat from generative AI.
Yep.
It's not an existential threat necessarily. It's a threat that really says, okay, what's our part in the future? What do we bring uniquely to the party?
Yep.
And frankly, as Skills GPT, we ask ourselves that same question.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to share all the answers today, but we have, fortunately, this very deep operational awareness and empathy for the whole world of skills management and workforce management that is arguably more important than the deep technical knowledge we have in language models.
Yep.
Because it's the bit that allows us to differentiate how those models are working with the information in the world.
I feel like the work that you're doing in, working with organisations, checking out their gaps in their skills and helping them, let's not use the word restructure, but redefine what the future of their workforce looks like structurally. It must be really pleasing. There must be a lot of satisfaction in helping people do that.
Well, it's phenomenal because again, there was, that point about heroic failure I talked about. There's a real frustration to that world where an organisation, which ultimately is a group of individuals, have the desire to progress, the will to progress, but it wasn't possible to evolve skills and capabilities sufficiently quickly.
Yep.
So to be able to help unlock that problem, we're part of hopefully the solution in Australia of trying to, Australia, you hear different figures, but needs to digitally upskill 1 million new employees in the next decade.
Yeah.
You could probably 3x that if you like, but, to be a part of some of these solutions is phenomenal. To be going to sound very virtuous, but to be part of the transition from, legacy, for example, energy economy to the green economy is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
To be we're helping in the kindy sector, we're helping in the aged care sector. And there's almost, I still haven't quite got an answer to this, but for some reason, these early prototypes, proof of concepts, early projects in generative AI, most of them could be classified as the AI for good
I like that.
bucket. And I don't know why that is, but it's far more the case than just AI for more profit, to get more out of people.
No, I think what you're doing in a nutshell, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are improving the employee experience at the very end of it. Doing all this stuff makes people's life at work much, much better.
And actually, just to clarify, I mean, if you think about any individual, so we're getting involved in a lot of projects that involve students, for example. Very, very early stage career, 13, 14 years old, starting to make career choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting example as well about the pace of the change in the world because, we've all been presumably at some point 13 or 14 years old, thinking about the future. And a big influence at the time is your parents.
Yeah.
Now, the reality these days is that the parents of a 13-year or 14-year-old typically hasn't got a clue what's going on in the world. They simply don't.
Yeah.
They're very well-meaning, but don't have. There's obviously exceptions, but don't really have. They haven't got the knowledge to help their child in the best possible way. So again, there's this massive information in the world. There's no shortage of information about careers and opportunities, but how an individual, how we demystify that information and help an individual to explore it, and I say explore deliberately for somebody of 13 or 14, they've got that desire, that inquisitiveness, is incredibly fulfilling. So we're becoming involved in projects there, linking people to upskilling, to the right training opportunities. But again, it's hard to explain, but in a very intuitive, natural sense, rather than knowing what course they need to search for.
I like it. This is a great space. I'm a bit envious that you're getting to play in this space because it's really, really interesting. I think you're really making a difference. I think that whole point about employee experience is really, really important because we spend so much of our time at work. We need to enjoy it. So hopefully next time we speak on this couch, you'll be able to update us on where you're progressing with that.
Absolutely,
it's
I'd love to.
Stuff.
I'd love to.
Let's come back. Let's do it again.
Let's do it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers, Chris.
Cheers.